Welcome to Developing the Leader Within podcast, the podcast that brings you leadership insights from the brightest minds shaping our world. Join us as we dive into conversation with trailblazers, innovators, and change makers, spanning every corner of the globe. Get ready to explore new perspectives, gain actionable insights, and become the leader the world needs today. Unleash your potential. Tune into Developing the Leader Within podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Let's embark on this transformative journey together. Developing the Leader Within podcast, leading beyond limits.
Welcome to International Month on DTLW Podcast. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so, as it'll help us get our show to others and help us reach our next milestone. Make sure to catch us streaming on Parade Deck, on Roku and Amazon Fire TV, on the Purpose Place Network, and catch our exclusive members-only content on Going Deep Within on the Lions Guide Academy. Today, we are honored and fortunate to be speaking with Gordon Tredgold. Gordon is a globally recognized leadership expert, business strategist, and best-selling author known for his practical approach to driving results. Gordon helps organizations and leaders achieve rapid, sustainable success. He is the founder of the FAST leadership principle: focused, accountable, simple, and transparent, which we'll be talking about today, which has been adopted by leaders worldwide to boost performance and productivity. Gordon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and what a nice introduction.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for being with us. Folks, we will be speaking about focus, accountability, simplicity, and transparency. But before we get into that conversation, Gordon, tell us a little bit about you.
My two passions are rugby and mathematics, which means I'm good at problem solving and I like to take on tough challenges, especially only being 5'6". I'm on the smaller side, but I for American football fans that are listening, I play the equivalent of centre and nose tackle in rugby. And 5'6" isn't the height to be doing that at unless you're highly competitive. So yeah, that would be about kind of my personality. And then I have a background working in IT, program management, and looking to leverage those two skills, taking on the biggest challenges problem and finding solutions to getting them delivered. And I've done that on for large Fortune 100 companies, DHL, just been working with a company called Smurfit Westrock, leading $100 million programs and teams of 1,000 people. So that's kind of my background. Oh yeah, and I would say in the last 10 years, I've started writing and sharing and coaching on leadership to share approaches that I think work pretty much every time.
Well, we're fortunate that you did go into that right mode, because we have been taking on all those things that you have been sharing.
Sure.
And so we really appreciate that. Now, on the topic, what inspired you to create the FAST leadership model, and how does it differ from other leadership frameworks?
Well, I don't really think there are a great number of leadership frameworks that relate to delivery. And for me, if you can't deliver, then what's the point? And I come from two aspects, people-centric and result-centric. And a lot of people say, it's good you're result-centric. Yeah, but you know what? It's the people that do the work. So you've got to be people-centric, but then know how to organize, motivate, and structure them in a way that will get them to deliver. If you're just people-centric, you're really nice, you won't deliver, and you'll be the nicest guy we've ever fired. So I focus on those two things. And where did FAST come from? I was coaching somebody for an interview and I said to him, what are your three strengths? And he said, I don't know. What are yours? And I thought, that's a really good question. I would say honest, hardworking, reliable, but that isn't really who I am. those things are true. But, I thought, what is it that differentiates me? And I thought, I get called in to deliver the big projects. And I thought, do I have a method that I repeat every time? And are those my strengths? So I started looking at it. And from a simple perspective, when you do a turnaround, there's only two things you do: find out what's wrong and fix it. Okay. And then when it comes to, so that was my first kind of, not epiphany, but you know what I mean, keeping it simple. And then my second question was, are there things that consistently go wrong that I'm looking for subconsciously? And can I then make that, can I become conscious and share that? And what I found was that the majority of things have failed because of a lack of focus. We're either focused on the wrong thing, or we don't know what success looks like, and a lack of accountability. And that's about the who. Have we told everybody? It's like I'm currently in marathon training, and as part of that, I'm trying to lose 40 pounds, 35 down. But even though I'm the only one that's eating, I've got to tell my wife, don't cook me huge meals. I've got to let people know what I expect of them. And a lot of times we don't do that. We just think everybody understands. And then it's a lack of simplicity. We overcomplicate things. And the simpler we can make it, the more belief people will have, and then the more confidence to step forward. And then the last part is a lack of transparency. We don't know how far it is or what's exactly involved. There's some great work by Gartner research group who said that on average, projects tend to be 3 times as much and 3 times as long as initial estimates. So if you go in with your initial estimate, there's a good chance you failed. You just don't know yet right at the start. So it's about making sure you've done that due diligence and then having the transparency into performance, kind of like a GPS. It's 20 minutes to grandma's house. 20 miles to grandma's house. I've been doing it for 15 minutes. I'm 15 miles there. So do we know where we are on the journey? If we're behind schedule, let's change it and up it. If we're on track, let's just keep pushing and praising people. So if those are the reasons why things fail, a lack of focus, accountability, simplicity, and transparency, if we improve in those areas, now we've eliminated the common causes of failure. Now we're going to have confidence. Now we're going to have belief. Now we're going to be inspired. And you've put your teams in a position where they can be successful. And for me, that is a leader's, I'm going to say only job, but I think it's the most important job. That is to put your team in a position where they can be successful. You've got to align their desires with the outcome, but if you do that and you put them in a position where they can be successful, then the teams they'll step up, they'll be motivated. Not only will they want to be successful, they'll want to be successful again. Success is a drug. Once you've got a taste of it, you want more of it. So, as leaders, it's our jobs to put our teams in a position to be successful and understanding what causes us to fail, which is what my strengths were. Um, it is what I uncovered, and that's why I wrote the book Fast, to teach everybody that same approach. And I do think it's, I don't want to say it's different from other leadership approaches, but it will work with any approach. If you're doing Six Sigma or whatever you're doing, understanding what success looks like, having people understand their role, keeping it simple, knowing what's involved and being able to track where you are, those are pretty basic fundamentals. And I think the other thing as well, I would say, is most people probably knew that already, but have forgotten, or we just got bogged down in the pressure of doing it, that we let these things slide. And what's really good with FAST, it's a very simple, have I got the right focus, accountability, simplicity, transparency. It's easy to keep that in your mind and keep yourself on track.
And I appreciate that framework. Now, when it comes to leaders, how can leaders use focus? Let's start with that to prioritize effectively when everything seems urgent and important.
So the thing about focus is that we've got to make sure that we clearly define what success looks like. I was coaching a lady who wanted to write a book, and I said, "How big is your book? How many words?" She said, "I don't know." And I said, "So how do you know when you're finished? You know, you need to know where the finishing line is so we can set up." So I'm a big fan of SMART goals, specific, measurable. I always say aspirational rather than achievable. Let's aim for something significant and then relevant to your strategy and time bound. And if you, and it's important for us to do that. I worked with a company and they said, our goal is to double our revenue in the next 2 to 4 years. And I said, well, which is it? If it's 2 years, we're increasing by 50% a year. That's one plan. If it's 25% a year, sorry, if it's 4 years, it's 25% a year. That's another plan. And if you don't tell your team, you'll have one team trying to increase by 50, another trying to do by 25, and now not everybody's aligned with what we're trying to do. So make sure you've got clarity around it and keep your goals to a minimum. You know, you should have big goals and then they'll break down into small goals, no more than three. Because if a big goal breaks down into 3 to 5 goals, if you've got 5 big goals, that now breaks down into 25 small goals. Now everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. So try and keep your goals, as I said, to a maximum of three at a big level because they will break down, and then be crystal clear, specific about what it looks like. And the reason why I love SMART goals, and nobody else, people have done something similar, but they've not really equated to it. But if you create a SMART goal, specific, measurable, time bound, then you can create a SMART report where if you're going to double your revenue in if you're going to double your revenue in 4 years, you can put milestones year one, year two, year three, year four, and then you can put the 100% increase, 25%, 25%, 25%. And you've got a very simple visual chart that allows you to do it. So SMART goals lead to SMART reports, and you can see where you are on that journey. And the SMART report, that's your transparency of progress that you're looking to make. The number of people that say to me, I'll ask them, do you have SMART goals? And they go, yeah. I went, can you show me the reports? Oh, well, we're struggling to track it. Yeah, but SMART goals, measurable, time bound. The M is the y-axis, the time is the x-axis. And if my goal is to lose 10 kilos in 10 weeks, so from 0 to 10 weeks, plot that curve and track where you go. If you can't create a progress report, you don't have a SMART goal and you don't know where you're going. Very, very simple, fundamental, and yet it's a trap dozens of corporations fall into. I see it all the time. And this is why for me, that's simplicity as well.
Very insightful indeed, folks. Get smart and do smart, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And everybody, and I ask, I when I do training events, I say, hands up all those who understand SMART goals. Every hand goes up, and I'll say, okay, how many people know what a SMART report is? Crickets. I was like, come on. one leads to the other, and yet a lot of people haven't made that link.
Well, I mean, it leads us to this next question about accountability, right? Because
Mhm.
it's very important. So, what role does accountability play in in team performances, and how can leaders create a culture of ownership without micromanaging?
Yeah. So the thing about focus sets the direction. This is what we want to do. This is when we want to have it done by. And accountability, it's about taking ownership. Exactly. Now, what's interesting is the verb we used, take. Take ownership, not I give ownership, I give accountability. It's take. So it's on the individual to choose whether they take it or not. And the way we get people to take accountability is one, we have to be accountable and set the tone. If we show accountability, we show what it is we're looking for. And then secondly, we have to there's a simple question we can ask, um, which is, do you have everything you need to be successful? And when they say yes, subconsciously now they've taken ownership. I've got everything I need. So as leaders, we need to make sure we give them everything they need to be successful. And when we do that, they will take accountability. And a lot of leaders say to me, but what happens if I can't give them everything they need to be successful? Well, you set them up for failure. And if they accept accountability, I will be stunned. And to be honest, your job is to set them up for success. So take accountability for your job. And if you can't, it's like if I said to you, I want you to make me a chicken and asparagus pie, and you said, great, give me the chicken and asparagus. I go, we don't have any asparagus. Now we have to negotiate the goal to just chicken pie. I can't insist it's chicken and asparagus when neither of us has any asparagus. And I appreciate that might seem like a really simple analogy, but it's as simple as that. If you can't give them everything they need to achieve what you'd like, you've got to negotiate that back down. Put them in a position where they can be successful. Because if you do that and then you offer support, people will trust you. They'll trust in themselves that they can do this and they'll take ownership. We can't, we can make people responsible. We cannot make them accountable. It's received.
I absolutely love that. And as you was talking, I said, if there, folks, if you don't listen to anything else on this one segment of podcast, that little bit right there for leaders is so important. I need you to understand that in the role of leadership, you have a role. That's why it says role of leadership. And your
Yeah,
role is always to ensure your team has what they need to be successful. If they do not, I love how you said it, Gordon, then you have to go into negotiation role because you can't
yeah.
expect something that you do not set them up for.
And I would just add one other point to this. I was going to say caveat, but it's not really a caveat. But if your boss tells you, I need you to make chicken and asparagus pie, go and get your team to do it. And if you go and tell your team and you don't have any asparagus, the negotiation isn't with your team. It's back to your boss. You've got to go tell your boss, we can't do this. And a lot of people would rather throw their team under the bus by saying, well, figure it out, rather than taking ownership of setting the team up for success. And that's where courage in leadership comes in, not in taking on bold goals, but rejecting things that are impossible and going back to your boss and saying, hey, this isn't possible. We don't have any asparagus. So you we can do chicken pie, but we can't do chicken and asparagus. So let's set that as the goal. And if you do that, not only will you set your teams up for success, your teams will respect you because you went back and said, what you've asked for isn't doable. This is doable. What you've asked for isn't. And the other thing to remember is that as the leader, you are accountable for overall success. And overall success is the sum of the individual successes within your team. So if your team succeeds, you succeed. If you set your team up for failure and they fail, you failed. So there's this symbiotic relationship between you. And, if you let your teams know that as well, that, hey, your failure is my failure, your success is my success, we're in this together, that'll build a much stronger connection and relationship.
Absolutely. Very powerful. Now we're talking about moving things forward and attaining things. In what way
Yeah.
can leaders apply simplicity to solve complex problems or drive major initiatives forward?
So simplicity is one of these things where it's easy to say, but it can be sometimes difficult to do. And, we need to keep things, we can't always keep things simple, but we can always keep it as simple as possible. And we need to remove unnecessary complexity. That would be my step one. And a lot of people, they feel that complex problems require complex solutions, and that's not true. Complex problems require solutions, and sometimes they can be simple, and sometimes they can be complex. But we need to make sure we look for simple solutions, and complex solutions are easy to find. Simple ones take a little bit longer, but that investment in looking for a simple solution pays off in the long run. So always take the time to look for simple solutions and challenge everything. And sometimes that simplicity can be just streamlining the approach. Micromanagement is complexity because you're putting in people where they have to give feedback every day, every 15 minutes, whatever. Just streamline that and make it simpler for people. But also, as well, I think we have to. I'm a mathematician, so one of the things I always remember is that A times B equals C. And if I want C to be smaller and I'm a master of A, I'm going to focus on making A as small as possible. But it's A times B. You can make A smaller and that'll make C smaller, or you can make B smaller and that will make C smaller. And sometimes we've got to step out of where our expertise is to look at all the elements. And I appreciate that might sound a little bit formulaic and mathematical, but I'll give you a classic example of that. This was about 20 years ago. We were writing a piece of code, and the piece of code took 5 minutes to execute, and we called it 1,000 times. So this was now taking 5,000 minutes, which is too long. That job needed to finish in half an hour, not 5,000 minutes. And I got all of the experts in the room with coding, and they looked at that 5 minute piece of code and they were able to get it down to 1 minute. Absolutely genius, but it's still taking 1,000 minutes. One of our secretaries, she said, why are we calling it 1,000 times? And we went, I don't know. And when we looked at it, it brought back the same answer every single time. So we only really needed to call it once. If it runs for 5 minutes and you're calling it once, that works. If you get it down to a minute and you're calling it 1,000 times, that doesn't work. But all of the coding experts, they were looking at that 5 minutes because that's where their expertise was. And the simple solution was in calling it once. Does that kind of show how we can get a bit myopic? So we need to take that step back and look at the whole picture. And sometimes we can make something else simpler that just makes everything fall into place.
I love that. Also, that highlights the power of team.
Mm.
This one individual that was not in the process was able to call that out and make everybody say,
I would go even further than that. I would say you're absolutely right. That highlights the power of team, but it also highlights the power of diversity because I got all of the coding experts, and yet it was a non-coding expert, a secretary. From a work involvement, you couldn't have two more diverse groups, and yet she solved a problem all of the experts couldn't solve because they were looking at the wrong thing. And this is why we need diversity, not just of ethnicity, religion, sex, but also thinking as well.
I just spoke about that, just that same thing not too long ago about the diversity of thought is the true power, right? And so
Was, was it
wonderful to
was
see
it
that.
Bill Gates that said if we're all thinking the same, then none of it, only one of us is thinking.
That is so true. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, we need that diversity of opinion. And that's what brainstorming should be. Brainstorming should be all of diverse ideas, and then we can, look at them and work our way through them.
Very powerful
And
indeed.
then the other thing with simplicity, I mentioned this is that this is an apocryphalic story, and apocryphalic is a complicated way of saying not really true, but it's a great teaching aid, and it goes back to the story in the 60s of NASA and the pen. NASA allegedly their pens didn't work in space. They invested $1 billion and they got the greatest pen minds together and they created a pen that would write in zero gravity and the coldest of temperatures. And the Russians didn't have the same level of pen technology, so they just carried on using pencils. And I always tell my teams if we spend $1 billion designing a pen and we had a pencil, somebody is going to feel the sharp end of that pencil very, very quickly. So we just need to, and as I say, I share that because it's not a true story, but it's a great example of what can happen if you get too focused on one area and don't just look at it and say, do we really need to do this? It's like when you're doing cost reduction, people say, how can we make this cheaper? The cheapest cost is don't do it. So that should be your first question. Do we need to do this? The answer is no. Boom. Zero cost to implement, zero cost going forward. But people look at reduction. No, elimination, then reduction, then optimization, and then automation.
That will have you thinking for a long time, folks. I love it. I'm loving every bit of this.
For me, I think this is the role of a leader. I don't know what the answer is, but I know what the question is. And I want to get people thinking differently so that they can then help us come up with the answers we need. So, for me, leadership, it's also about being provocative and getting people to think in different ways and different perspectives. Get out of your comfort zone.
Now, Gordon, you describe transparency not
Yeah.
just as a leadership trait, but more like a GPS for success, helping
Yeah.
clearly see the path, track the progress, and course correct in real time. So, how
Yeah.
can leaders build this kind of visibility into their initiatives to ensure they stay on track and hit their goals?
So, for me, the absolute simplest approach is create a smart goal, then create a smart report. Measurable, if you're going to try and lose 10 kilos in 10 weeks, 0 to 10, 1 to 10 weeks. You can do a linear plot of what you think it is, or let's say you're selling clothing and you want to increase revenue by 1.2 million. I say that because then that works out at 100,000 a month. But you might, instead of, you could draw 100,000 a month, but you might think, you know what, we don't sell as many of these in winter, so we'll just go for 50% of the expected gains in winter. We'll sell more in spring and summer, then it'll tail off in autumn. And then you've got a curve. And then what you do is you just plot in your progress. And if you understand how you're going to make progress, I mean, there's no point in getting upset with your team if in December we didn't sell that many summer vests. You wouldn't expect it. You might spell some, but you can't be saying, "Oh my God, we haven't sold 100,000." It's winter. So we need to understand what the expected outcome is at each stage of the process. And some things will be linear, but like weight loss, if you're going to lose 10 kilos in 10 weeks or 10 pounds in 10 weeks, you're probably going to be losing 2 pounds that first week, then a pound and a half, a pound. And then as you get down, it's going to be half a pound. So you want to be able to plot that profile of what performance is going to be. Because then when your team hit it, you can go, good job, well done. Good job, well done. But if you don't have a profile, then just draw a line and kind of go with it. And the other thing with transparency is that it also gives us a mechanism for feeding back and holding people accountable. We can hold people accountable. We can't make them take accountability. But if you've got a performance chart like that, there's no need for any great discussion. You're going to try and lose 10 pounds in 10 weeks. Everything should be database. So I don't know here how you're feeling. Get on the scales. So we should have as much automated, whether it's sales data, revenue data, output data, and then let's track it. And then when we're looking at it, we're not going to have a discussion as to whether this number's right or wrong. We're going to have a discussion about, are we on track? If we are, good job, well done. If we're not, we're behind. What are we going to do to fix it? Or even better, the best question a leader can ask: what do you need from me to help you get back on track? And I'm going to say this: throughout my entire 35-year career, I have fired 2 people. I've had hundreds of people where we sat down and every month we've gone through the performance data and they just looked at me and said, you know what? I don't think this is for me. And if I'm supportive in every single day, this is not a difficult conversation on my part. Because, it's like looking at the football results every weekend. This week we're 0-1, next week we're 0-2, next week we're 0-3. At the end of the season, when we're 0-16, it shouldn't be a surprise that, contract extension discussions probably ain't going to be top of list. But it allows us to be, fair about it because we've looked at it all the way through. It doesn't come as a surprise. And if we're saying, and what do you need from me? What do you need from me? As I said, what I found is that at some point people just say to me, I don't think this is for me. Can we find a job that I can do? Or I think I need to do something else. And I can say, sure, let me help you with that. It makes it a whole lot easier. And it's just about having that visibility into performance.
Absolutely agree, and very powerful to think about it that way, leaders, because sometimes that travel, that journey is not for them, but you
Yeah.
must, that is a must, you must always offer what it is that I can do for you to get on track.
So let me just come back to accountability. As I said, if you don't have transparency, you can't hold people accountable. What are you holding them accountable for? Perfume, dress sense? I don't know. We need visibility and performance. The top 6 reasons, I'm making it up as I go along now. It could be 7, it could be 8. Top 6 reasons why people fail. Didn't understand what the goal was, didn't have the time available, didn't have the resources, didn't have the skills, didn't get the support, didn't have the knowledge, couldn't be bothered to do it, was just taking the money because they needed the money. Those first 6, I didn't know what the goal was. That's my fault. They didn't have the time. That's my fault. They didn't have the skills. That's my fault. Didn't have the understanding. My fault. Didn't have the support. My fault. So when our teams fail, I did include 2, they just couldn't be bothered and they were just here for the money. But that's not the norm. In the majority of cases, the reason why people fail, it comes back to the leader. And this is why we talk about engagement, but we always talk about teams being engaged. Leaders need to be engaged with their team. And we need to be having accountability meetings with people saying, how are we doing? What's the progress? And then what do you need from me? And if after 10 weeks of them saying, I don't need anything, and being 0 and 10, you can let that person go with a slightly heavy heart, but it's not a difficult conversation. And the other thing I will say is that in my experience, if you set people up for success, they will grab it with both hands. Nobody come to work expecting to fail.
Well,
Nobody comes to work looking to fail. Everybody wants to be successful. We set them up for success, and that's why I've only fired 2 people. Because most people, if you set them up for success, they will take it. They might not all be world class, and we might have to dial success down a little bit. It might be make the playoffs rather than win the Super Bowl. But if we set them up for success, most people will take it and we'll get better performance out of them. But that requires leaders to be engaged and to understand what you're accountable for, which is setting your team up for success.
absolutely. Now, you mentioned earlier about your books. So, what do you have coming up, and where can a viewer or the listener follow or support you?
So from a simplistic perspective, I'm very fortunate in that I am the only Gordon Tredgold in the entire world. So if you go and Google Gordon Tredgold, you will find me on LinkedIn, Amazon, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. So you can go and find my stuff. I've got a few books on Amazon. Fast. I got leadership. It's a marathon, not a sprint, which is about how to. It's about leadership and how I leveraged it to run a marathon at 52. So it shows you leadership principles and how to apply them in practical circumstances with me as a guinea pig. Then there's Fast, which is much more formulaic about how we improve focus, accountability, simplicity, and transparency to drive results. And July 2nd, I just released a new one, and that's called 20 Habits of Highly Ineffective and Unsuccessful Leaders. Things your team would love to tell you, but will never, things your teams hate about you, but will never say to your face. So it's an opportunity. It's kind of a mirror to look in for some of those things that you might do that set your team back. And just so that we're crystal clear, I'm no saint. I think I've been guilty of at least 19, if not all 20 of those at some times.
Well, I think that we both will will look at that as a mirror and say, "Oh yeah, I did that."
I write that book for two people. One is the self aware leader who wants to do that self reflection, and it's a great tool for them. But I've also written it so that teams can just buy it, score their leader, don't leave any fingerprints, and then just leave it anonymously on their desk as a guide for, yeah, we wouldn't say this to your face, but given somebody's written the book, here's your report card. Go and fix these things for us.
I'm sure it'll be a Christmas favorite for a lot of folks.
When I wrote the article, it, when I wrote the article, it was in Business Insider and it got 500,000 views. And then people were writing to me saying, "My boss has got 19 out of 20. Does he win an award?" And other people were sending me emails saying, "This is my boss's email. Please forward it to him. I'm afraid I'll get fired if I do it." So I know there's those two audiences, the people that want to get better and the people that want their boss to get better, but he might not be or she might not be as self-aware as they might be.
I love that. Well, Gordon, I've enjoyed this conversation. I know the audience has enjoyed the conversation. And folks, today's episode is sponsored by the Global Trends Magazine, the Outlier Project, Fantail Services, Southern Sweet and Sassy Coffee, Ascend Meditations, and Chop AI. And if you've enjoyed this episode and learned something like I did, interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let us know by leaving a comment. Tune in
Absolutely.
next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.